It was a golden Sunday morning when I pulled up to our family's lake cabin, nestled deep in the pines of Grayson Shores' sleepy, HOA-governed lakeside development that hadn't changed much since the early 90s. I drove my aging but sturdy pickup truck loaded with boxers, duffel bags, framed photos, and sealed storage bins, all belonging to my daughter, Staff Sergeant Melissa Carter, who had just been deployed overseas for a second time. She had asked me to store her things at the lake cabin, a family property passed down from my father to me, built before the HOA even existed. I unlocked the wooden gate, pulled around the gravel loop, and began unloading her belongings, setting them gently inside the screened porch. I was halfway through carrying her military-issued footlocker when I heard the screech of tires and a shrill voice cutting through the peaceful air like a rusty blade. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" barked Karen Hallwell, the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA and president for life of the Grayson Shores Property Association. Dressed in a peach tracksuit and armed with a clipboard and a phone, she marched onto my property like she owned it. I calmly told her I was moving my daughter's belongings into our cabin. She snapped that storing military cargo outside violated HOA Code 4.6b, and that I had to cease immediately or face legal escalation. I explained, firmly, that this property was not under the HOA's jurisdiction because it predated the neighborhood. My father had built the cabin 35 years ago, before any association was formed. That didn't satisfy her. She took a picture of my truck, snapped a close-up of my license plate, and without another word, called 911. She reported a suspicious man unloading boxes into an unpermitted structure. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up, lights flashing, sirens mercifully silent. I remained calm, met the officers halfway down the drive, and explained the situation. One of them, a younger guy named Deputy Collins, asked for ID and ownership documents. That's when I produced the land survey, the original deed, and a notarized declaration of exemption signed by the county in 1995. The cabin was legally distinct from HOA oversight. Karen shouted from behind the officers. "He's lying. That document isn't valid anymore. The HOA governs this entire area now." But Deputy Collins and his partner reviewed the paperwork, compared it to their electronic property maps, and realized she was dead wrong. Still, she kept pushing. She claimed the boxes on the porch constituted unauthorized external storage. She insisted that the HOA had authority over environmental aesthetics, and that my presence created a disturbance. The officers had heard enough. "Ma'am," one said bluntly, "he's not only on his own property, he owns this land, free and clear. We can't help you enforce HOA rules." But Karen wasn't done. She declared she would fine me $500 a day until the boxers were removed, and announced she would convene an emergency HOA meeting to demand my immediate compliance. I laughed. Something in me snapped that moment. I wasn't just some guy stacking boxes. I was a veteran, a father, and a landowner, and more importantly, I knew something she didn't. I had the power to change everything. See, years ago, when I inherited the land, I sold off a large portion of it taken by accredited developers, who built what became Grayson Shores. I held on to 5 acres, including the lakefront, the cabin, and the legal rights to the access road and utilities easement. But here's the kicker. I had placed restrictive covenants in the original land contracts that allowed the HOA to form but made it subject to annual renewal and landowner approval, namely, my approval. And for 20 years, I let them govern in peace, never intervening. But now, after being treated like a trespasser on my own land while doing a favor for my daughter, that grace period was over. I called my attorney that night. I told him to initiate the dissolution clause. And the very next morning, the paperwork was filed with the county. By the time the HOA held their emergency meeting, that Friday stacked with angry retirees, demanding my head, it was already too late. The county registrar had received and validated my declaration. The HOA's legal status was frozen pending review, and just like that, Karen's little empire began to crumble. Word spread fast around Grayson Shores. The so-called troublemaker with the truck had, overnight, become a legend. Some neighbors were shocked, others angry, and a quiet few began slipping me thank you notes in my mailbox. Karen, however, was relentless. She stood at the front of the HOA clubhouse built on a parcel I technically still owned, declaring that my actions were illegal, vindictive, and an attack on the integrity of our community. She tried to rally the board to sue me, but her power was unraveling fast. Without the renewal clause signed, the HOA's authority over any of the parcel's roads, water access, clubhouse, trash collection was invalid. The insurance they relied on for liability lapsed. Their right to assess fines gone. Their enforcement arm defeated. And when I sent certified letters to every homeowner explaining the situation, that I had legally dissolved the HOA through the original charter clause, they were stunned. Some panicked, fearing their property values would drop. Others were ecstatic, finally free of fines for having the wrong color, flower pots, or excessive lawn decor. I held a town hall at the edge of my property, invited everyone. I explained calmly that this wasn't retaliation, it was reclamation. My family's name was on the land before the HOA even existed. My daughter was serving overseas and deserved respect, not harassment. And if the HOA couldn't recognize that, then maybe they didn't deserve to exist at all. Still, Karen fought back. She filed an injunction to halt the dissolution, claiming it would cause irreparable harm to the community. But when the case reached the county civil court, the judge reviewed the documents, the original land deeds, the developer contracts, and my notarized rights. His ruling was clear. The HOA was formed by consent of the original landowner. That consent is now legally withdrawn. The HOA is hereby nullified. Karen was speechless. Her years of controlling mailboxes, dictating lawn heights, and issuing threats with smug satisfaction wiped out in one ruling. She tried to protest, saying this would lead to chaos. But the reality, nothing changed except that people could breathe again. I offered the residents a choice: form a voluntary neighborhood association with no enforcement power, or let things be. Most chose freedom. One by one, the ridiculous violations were taken off doors. People painted their shutters, parked trucks in their own driveways, and kids played in inflatable pools without fear. The cabin, it remained my daughter's haven. When she returned 6 months later, I picked her up at the airport and drove her straight to the lake. She stepped out of the truck, saw the porch with her boxers neatly stacked inside, and hugged me tight. "Thanks, Dad," she whispered. I smiled. "They called 911 on me for you." I gave them something to really worry about. Later that evening, we sat around a fire pit with neighbors, laughing, talking, finally free of Karen's reign. The stars shimmered off the lake, and for the first time in a long time, Grayson Shores felt like a community, not a dictatorship. Karen eventually sold her home and moved to another HOA, 2 counties over. Rumor has it, she tried to run for president there, too, but after hearing what happened in Grayson Shores, they voted her down unanimously. As for me, I still walk the gravel path to the cabin every morning, coffee in hand, peace in my heart. The lake is still, the trees whisper in the wind, and there's no clipboard, no threats, no HOA to ruin the serenity. Just me, the land, and a promise kept for my daughter. And for everyone who believed we could live without being controlled by a petty tyrant in a peach tracksuit. And in the end, that freedom was worth every legal battle, every meeting, every ounce of patience. Because now, the only thing that governs Grayson Shores is common sense.